Since I am the Sugar Shack lady, I thought it's about time I did a decadent chocolate cake for you guys. While this is not the classic chocolate cake we used to do at the shack, it's one delicious cake and it's actually super simple to make. Do watch till the end because I have loads of tips and tricks on how to ice a cake perfectly. Start by dissolving 2 teaspoons of instant coffee in some hot water. Set this aside so that it cools down a little bit while you're prepping the rest of the ingredients. So for this batter, you need 2 large bowls. In one bowl, we mix the wet ingredients. Pour in the vegetable oil, 2 eggs, some curd or Greek yogurt, and vanilla. Give this a mix using a whisk until everything is nicely combined. And then add in the sugar to the wet ingredients. Whisk this together until most of the sugar has dissolved into the batter. This may take about 5 to 7 minutes of whisking. Then grab the second bowl. In this, we are mixing the dry ingredients. Sift in the flour. We are using cake flour for this. And then go in with 2 teaspoons of baking powder, 1 teaspoon of baking soda, and finally 1 teaspoon of salt. Salt is very important when making sweet baked goods because it really helps to bring out that depth of flavor. And then finally, go in with the cocoa powder. Sift this straight into the large mixing bowl and then give it a quick mix using the whisk just to combine everything. And then pour in the wet ingredients that we mixed before. Everything except for the coffee for now. Pour this in slowly while whisking. At first, it will look like it's a sandy looking flour, but then as you keep adding the wet ingredients in, it will start coming together to form this thick, intensely chocolate looking batter. Don't worry if this feels super stiff right now. Once you have added in all of the wet ingredients to the dry, then we can go in with the coffee. The coffee should have cooled down to be lukewarm by now. Coffee really helps to bring out that chocolatiness of chocolate, if you know what I mean. Pour the coffee in a little at a time and work it into the batter. You will find the batter slowly loosening up, and then suddenly you will have a very wet, watery looking batter. Don't worry if this feels a lot more watery than the usual thick cake batter we're all used to. It will bake up beautifully. And now your cake batter is ready. Line 3 8-inch baking pans with baking paper. Just dip your finger in the batter and then apply the batter to the sides of the baking pan. And then stick the baking paper to the pan. Pour equal amounts of the batter into each baking pan. You can eyeball it, but I always prefer to weigh it out. It should be roughly about 460 to 480 grams each. Let me know in the comments if you guys want me to do more cake videos like this for you. Once you have poured the batter into the baking pans, bake this in a preheated oven for about 18 to 20 minutes. Just touch the cake in the middle to check if it's slightly springy, and then you can take it out of the oven. Let it cool down in the baking pan while you make the ice. To make the chocolate icing, we're using a stand mixer with a paddle attachment. To the bowl of your stand mixer, add in room temperature butter. I always use salted butter. Then go in with cocoa powder and get this mixing on a low speed just to combine. It's important to use room temperature butter so that the ingredients combine easier. Once the butter and the cocoa powder has combined, start spooning in the icing sugar. Do this a few spoonfuls at a time. Halfway through adding the icing sugar, scrape the bowl down to make sure there aren't any lumps of ingredients left at the bottom of the bowl. Continue mixing this on a low speed until you have added in all of the icing sugar. Once the icing sugar has been added in, then we pour in the heavy cream. This will loosen up the icing. And then finally, go in with some melted chocolate. Make sure that the chocolate has cooled down before adding it into the icing. If not, the icing will split. Scrape the bowl down again just to make sure everything is nicely mixed through, and then give it a quick mix on a high speed and your icing is ready. Now if you can't be bothered doing all of this, a classic chocolate icing where you just beat together butter, icing sugar and cocoa powder would work really nicely for this cake as well. Now that the cakes have cooled down and the icing is ready, let's ice this cake. I have lots of tips and tricks for you guys on how to ice a cake. Take the cakes out of the cake tin. First release the sides of the cake from the tin using a knife or spatula, and then confidently and quickly flip the tin over onto a chopping board, and then lift the cake tin and your cake should come out nicely. Peel the baking paper and flip the cake carefully, and then just trim any uneven bits to even out your cake layers. Do this for all 3 cake layers. To make the syrup to soak the cake with, just mix a spoonful of icing with some hot water until it's dissolved. Take a cake board or plate and then apply a little bit of icing onto the board. Then put the first layer of cake so that the bottom side of the cake is on top. Press this down so it sticks to the board. Use a pastry brush and then brush on some of the syrup onto the cake. This helps to lock in the moisture and seal any stray crumbs. Add a generous scoop of chocolate icing to the middle and use an offset spatula to gently smoothen out the icing. Start from the middle and then push the icing towards the corners. Don't press down too much when doing this so that you get a nice thick layer. Then take the next layer of cake, again flip it over so that the bottom is facing up, keep it on top of the ice layer, press it down to help it stick and repeat the same thing. Syrup, then icing. This is a close-up on how to smooth the icing from the middle towards the edges. And then go in with the final layer of cake. Press it gently but firmly so that all the layers stick to each other. Icing acts as a glue to keep the cake layers together. Be very careful though, because this cake is super soft and delicate. Now we do what is called a crumb coat. This is basically covering the whole cake with a thin layer of icing so that all the crumbs get locked in. I find it easier to first ice the top and then do the sides. Using the spatula, push the icing towards the edges and then let it go over the edge just a little bit. And then start to ice the sides using the icing that has gone over the edge. Smoothen the icing out. And then if you need more, just add a little and keep icing the sides until the whole cake is covered. Use a little bit of pressure when doing this so that the icing sticks to the cake and seals in the crumbs. Plus, we don't want a thick layer of icing at this point because otherwise, when we do the top coat, it'll be just too much icing. Once the cake is crumb coated, pop it in the freezer to set for about 10 minutes. And then that really seals everything in, makes the cake more stable, and therefore just so much easier to do a nice neat top layer of icing. For the final coat of icing, we do the same as we did the crumb coat, but just with a bit more icing so that it's a thicker layer. Start from the top, slowly push the icing from the middle towards the edges until it goes over, and then do the sides, adding more icing as needed. Once you're happy with how the sides are looking, hold the spatula at a 90-degree angle against the side of the cake and then turn the turntable one whole round so that it smoothens the whole side of the cake in one go. That way you won't have any marks of uneven icing. And then use the spatula to smoothen out any bits of icing that's popping up from the sides. And that's how you get those clean 90-degree edges. Finish this off with some sprinkles and then pop this in the fridge for about 15 to 20 minutes to chill so that everything is nicely set. And then slice into that beautifully soft, moist, decadent chocolate cake and enjoy. Let me know in the comments if you guys want me to make more cakes like this. Thanks for watching. Bye.